Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson, and today we have a somewhat unique show. We are basing this episode, and this episode is part of our Joyful Art of Business, and that, of course, is the entire concept that when we look at our work in life, whether it's paid or unpaid, that we need to not just sort of use return on investment metrics to see whether or not we were, quote, successful based on, income or promotions or things of that nature, but we also need to look at how we feel. How do we feel about it? One of the things that is so important to me when I discuss, sort of the concept of the Joyful Art of Business and everything that is part of this foundation, and of course the institute that I have founded to try to address these issues, is that some people are dismissive, of the idea, well, who really cares how you feel? People say sometimes, I'm going to feel good when I'm rich, right? But that's not really a valid across the board conclusion, because there are lots and lots of people who are really rich and they don't feel joyful. They don't feel good. Some of them we know in our personal lives. Some of them we might see in the media or on television and think, well, how could somebody who's a big, rich, successful business person or successful entertainer or successful artist or successful athlete, how could they have all these, really negative feelings and choices and have bad outcomes in their lives? And it's because we've got to, in my estimation, be holistic in how we make assessments in our lives. And part of that is when we look at our work and all of our endeavors, that we don't only focus on what other people think of us, but we focus on how we feel about ourselves and about the things that we're engaged in. So that's fundamentally important from my perspective for everything that I do and all the clients that I work with. And so in this specific episode, which is part of our series, The Joyful Art of Business, Practicing the Joyful Art of Business, this specific episode is built around a quote from one person, one quote from one person, and the quote is, the title of the episode is, I never intended to become a run-of-the-mill person. I never intended to become a run-of-the-mill person. So that's our quote. And I think there's a couple of things that when sort of was going through the show list and looking at this for a potential episode was, one, I was struck immediately emotionally by this sentiment and the quote and the idea on a couple of things that just were a bit unique. First is this idea of intention. The quote starts off with, I never intended. And so it's not an accident. It's not just sort of waiting to see what happens, what fate brings our way. But there's an intention to it. And there's so many different programs that I share how fundamental it is for all of us individually to make decisions about whether or not we, ascribe to a life and choices where we believe our intention matters in any way. And this quote goes right to the heart of this. This is about a person laying out a blueprint and saying, I didn't intend this. I never intended this thing. That alone is powerful. We do so much when we discuss so many different types of topics, business issues, legal issues, and solutions across the board. And in this show and the other programs I put forward, we do so much talking about, this idea of change and how do we, achieve and get to a point where, we surpass our goals. I talk about all of that all the time. I'm going to surpass my goals. And the idea of having intention is fundamental to that, because if I'm somebody who believes that things just happen, no matter what I do, life just happens, then I'm not sitting around having intentions, because why would you go to sit around and waste time making plans and intending things if what you intend is meaningless in terms of what your life is? So I think one, again, this idea of intention, and also this idea of intention not from sort of a positive, I intend that I'm going to accomplish this, or I intend that I'm going to travel to this place, or I intend that I'm going to, have this type of personal family. No, it's a negative. It's renouncing something, and I like that. That's powerful. I never intended. So it's not that this was a specific thing. If it happened, it happened. Who really cares? But it's not. It's an intention, but it is a powerful repudiation. Never. And then the next part. So I never intended to become, which again to me just resonates emotionally. I never intended to become. So this is someone looking forward, out into the unknown. No matter whether we believe that it's sort of fate and predestiny that controls our lives, or that we have some impact in our lives, we still don't know what's going to happen. I mean, that's the sort of the unfolding adventure of it all. Every time I wake up, I think, wow. And I really, once I kind of rub my eyes and confirm that I'm not sleeping, but I'm really awake, who would have thought, right? I'm alive on whatever day this is. It's the first time it's ever happened on the calendar. It's not going to happen again, and I'm here. And so there's this adventurous, kind of exciting, exhilarating part of life, and some people look at that same unknown and get nervous and think, I have so much anxiety. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Am I going to get the job? Am I going to keep the job? Will I get the promotion? Will I get my house? Will I lose my house? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And that sort of thing, it becomes a negative instead of it becoming sort of this exciting adventure. And the thing about the quote that I love is I hear somebody, when they're making the quote, when they're thinking a thought, and they're looking forward, and they're talking about this idea about becoming, to become. Not that it'll happen to them, not that, wouldn't it be great if it did, but to become this. And again, it's following along with this sort of consistent theme of an intention. So somebody who believes that their desires and actions and behaviors have some impact on their life. It's a very strong, powerful, absolute rejection of something. They're saying, I never. And then they're talking about to become something. So that's giving you an idea of the process. And when they're talking about what this end result of this process is, this thing that they're completely disowning, saying, I never, ever, ever intended to become a run-of-the-mill person. And so the phrase run-of-the-mill is sort of, this idea that you're average. Average, mediocre, run-of-the-mill, mundane, dull, just, nothing anyone would notice. And this is a powerful sentiment coming from anybody. Looking forward. Or maybe at some point in their life looking back and reflecting on how they felt in the past. And saying, I never intended. So it's not an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't just, oh, look what happened. It was an intention to become. So a process, right? You don't wake up one day, but to become over time a run-of-the-mill person. That's powerful. That would be powerful coming out of the mouth of anybody. Today, yesterday, tomorrow. One, that you're that assertive and honest, that you wanted and intended, you did something, you planned ahead, and that you did not desire to be this run-of-the-mill average person. On so many different levels, it's unusual because many people who have aspirations where they think, well, I don't want to be average, I don't want to be run-of-the-mill. I want to be something different. They might think that, but who says that? Like, really, who says that? Who even says that to themselves? One of the things I deal with constantly in all of the professional development and education and training programs and experiences is this kind of concept of the fear of success. And it's one of the things that it amazes me, right? You think, well, goodness gracious, right? Well, who would be fearful of success? I mean, isn't that sort of the whole point? And if you sabotage yourself because you're fearful of success, like, what on earth is the plan? What do you want? What do you think is going to be the outcome? But it ties into this concept where so many of us won't even admit to ourselves, even in a whisper, what our true heart intentions and dreams are. And it becomes very difficult for us to meet goals, surpass goals, all those kind of stuff that, sort of a high level of, now I can reflect on the emotional return on my investment. Many people argue with me and say, look, I'm not worried about whether or not I'm joyful. I'm worried about whether or not I have somewhere to live, whether or not I can pay my bills, right? I'll save joy for another day. And my argument is, I hear you, and I have not lived your life, so you're the expert on your life. I would encourage you, though, if you have any interest in moving beyond just that basic question, how will I eat today? Where will I live tomorrow night? That you expand, again, more holistically, broader, your range of analysis. I did a program about, basically it was like, I know I'm getting by, but how do you get ahead? And that's the whole question, right? You get to a certain point and deal with that one question every single day. Like, I need to go out today and work, X number of hours at, $8 an hour, pay US to get a certain amount of money to be able to pay my bill. You can just do that over and over and over again, but you're never going to change the circumstances, and you're just going to be answering the same question every single day, right? God, that same amount of money to come with the rent at the, the first of the month. That's fine if that gives you contentment and you feel that you, if you feel good about you, then that's all the answer is. But people often express that, no, I want more. They say, I want more than this. Okay, well, that's what I'm here to try to facilitate a discussion. And part of the foundation that begins to prevent people from even conceiving of more, because you have to have the conception and you have to have the plan based on sort of the outlines of what the conceived goal is, and then you have to start trial and error and working through to determine what the right steps would be. You have to be able to own it and name it. And by name it, I mean name whatever it is your goal is. And that's where people get stuck. People can't even begin to accomplish whatever it is that they secretly yearn for if they won't even define what it is. And again, one of the things I love by the power of this really short one-sentence quote is the speaker of the quote is saying, look, this was an intention. This wasn't an accident. I made the decision to absolutely never be or become this run-of-the-mill person. That is a powerful thing. And it also, in a way, has some hubris to it. Again, who says that? Who says that I set this goal for myself or I'm not going to be average? Wow. Anyone who were to say anything like this at any time, including today, people would think, imagine you went to see your friend, to have, a lunch with, and your friend's talking, and your friend said, I never intended to become a run-of-the-mill person. A lot of people would think, well, my God, goodness, well, who do you think you are? What are you going to be, queen? Really? There's great power unleashed when we begin to envision for ourselves different possibilities, right? So the idea that the speaker of this quote said, I never intended to become average, ever. That's got some strength to it, some assertiveness, some chutzpah, some cojones, some people would say. I mean, that's somebody saying, look, this wasn't, I won the lottery one day and then changed my life. This is, I had a plan. And my plan was that I was not going to be or become run-of-the-mill. Now, it's a statement that once again is sort of boastful almost. But let's look and see a little bit, just for a few moments, about the speaker. So the speaker's name is Barbara Jordan. Barbara Jordan no longer is alive. She passed away in 1996, and she, during her lifetime, was an American. I was born in America and worked largely in America, or mostly in America, for her large professional accomplishments. And so she was born and worked and lived in the state of Texas, which is a very large, physically, geographically large state in Texas, and it's a place that I lived in for many years myself. And Barbara Jordan was a politician. Sort of the first thing that comes to people's mind. She was somebody who ran, for office and was a politician, and she was a politician at the state level, so she was a politician in the state of Texas. In fact, she was a politician who had accomplished many firsts in the state of Texas. She was the first African American or black or Negro or color, depending on your terminology of when you grew up. But she was the first black woman to serve in the Texas government as a senator. She was in the Texas government as a House of Representatives member in the 1960s, and then in the Texas Senate. And then she left the state level and went to the national federal government and was a member of the United States House of Representatives. And again, because she was born in 1936, so when she was making her professional decisions, in many instances, she was the first person to do what she'd done. So she was, in fact, the first black female that was from the southern part of the United States elected to serve in the United States House of Representatives. That's pretty impressive. And so when you look at her bio, and I hope that you do, so you can learn a little bit about her, when you read the quote, which seems sort of boastful and, I never intended to become a run-of-the-mill person, and sort of you don't know who's saying it. You're thinking, well, all right, well, what happened to you? How did it turn out for you, right? How's that working for you? But you look at what she accomplished, and okay. So irrespective of whether or not somebody, knows anything about her or about the fact she's a politician, she was able, for whatever reason, to be the first person of her gender, of her ethnicity, to move into certain powerful work positions. She won all types of achievements and awards for her professional accomplishments, for her work in society toward problem-solving many issues. And one of the things that she was most known for people who were alive when she was alive and were aware of her, is that she had this really impressively, some would say formal speaking voice. So she's really known as a great speaker. And she speaks in a way that actually reminds me of a lot of my relatives who were born about the same time that she was, who are no longer alive. But sort of it was a certain type of cadence and delivery that sounds sort of formal to people sometimes in modern times, but it's very common in that generation, especially for people who had professional experiences across the board. And it sort of reminds me the actor Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier is still alive, but he's an older gentleman, and he has a very similar speaking style. The diction is very crisp and clear. And when you look at he is and has been an award-winning actor, but a black actor who, again, at the time that he was working and taking leading roles in large motion pictures and achieving many firsts in his job, Barbara Jordan was achieving many firsts in her job, and they have somewhat similar speaking styles, I would argue, just sort of as a layperson who's not a linguist, that you do hear these very, again, clear pronunciation of every syllable, and things are articulated, consonants, vowels, fully. And I think part of it is generational. And that was what my argument is, that I've had people in my own family who speak like that, and I think it's partially generational, and then I think it's also partially people of a certain generation who had certain types of professional activities when they were the first person who ever, was in those jobs that looked like them. And so it's not anything that is unusual if you know people that have that ethnic background and that age. but it's, sort of common. So I would encourage you, when I started working on this show, I went and re-listened to some speeches Barbara Jordan gave online, and that's the wonderful thing about the technology. It's just great. And one of the things she's most remembered for is she gave a keynote speech in the U.S. when the president is elected. Basically in the U.S. there's two very large political parties, and they put on these conventions every 4 years when there's a presidential election. And so Barbara Jordan was a keynote speaker at one of those conventions, and in fact she was the first black woman keynote speaker at this major political party keynote convention in the 1970s. And if you just listen to any of her speeches that are online, you'll hear when I'm saying the diction. And my argument is, don't be either positively or negatively swayed by that. It's again, I would argue, somewhat prevalent among people of that generation, and certainly of that generation who were prominently in the public, especially as the first to accomplish a certain professional goal or visibly public role. But listen to the content of what she's saying. So, my argument is, yes, it's a formal way of speaking, but listen to the power of what her words are. It's engaging, it's wonderful. But what she also was doing was putting forward some, even today, somewhat risky content. And she's someone who, anytime you interact with somebody, and I hope that you do, or you are this person who's the first to do something. People like that, when there's nobody to call or ask or read a book about or anything, how do you do this? And you have to get over mentally the idea that you can't do it. It takes a certain amount of confidence and assertiveness in yourself, because you have to believe it's possible, right? Just because nobody else has ever done it doesn't mean it can't be done. And then you have to believe that you could be the one. And then you have to have enough assertiveness to deal with other people or societal feedback saying, well, are you silly? Why on earth would anybody, let you do something like that when nobody like you's ever done it? And that's a hard psychological situation to face. But when you look and read from throughout human history, people who've done this, they have that fortitude and that faith in themselves. And that's what this quote to me is so emblematic of. She did accomplish a lot in an area that wasn't one that initially people would have told her as a little child growing up in the 1930s, 1940s in the United States, that this was probably going to be a viable job option for her, right? You're going to go to the United States House of Representatives? Right. And work there as a congressperson? Right. But she believes in herself. She doesn't necessarily have that goal, that will happen on a certain day maybe, but she has the concept that she can be more than just this sort of whatever average idea that other people have for her. And that's the takeaway. I myself don't ever aspire to, have not ever thought about politics for myself, but I definitely understand the idea and this quote, the process of thinking through, what's your intention? If you believe your intentions matter in some percentage in the outcomes in your life, what is it that I would absolutely say never, that I never want to become? And what does it mean for someone to say, I never intended to become run-of-the-mill? And then you look at what they accomplished, and whether or not you agree with the person's, analysis or substance of what their positions were, they did accomplish things that nobody else had accomplished, and they've left a legacy in higher education, in politics, in the society, and of course in many people who had the ability, just either through a television or now through internet, to hear what she had to say and how she said it. That's a powerful, powerful thing. How many of the billions of people alive today on the planet are going to leave a legacy where people remember them, where they made a difference and contributed in a positive way? That's amazing. And so I would ask you to do this. What are your intentions? and this is something that I talked about in so many different programs, and it comes up over and over and over again. Or someone will say, "Hey, look, I wouldn't mind being really quote financially successful or get some kind of really great job, and if it happens, I'm totally ready for it. But I'm not gonna sit around and wait for something that probably will never happen. I have to be realistic, and life is hard." I will never, ever be the one to disagree that life is hard. I believe it's much worse, than hard. I think life can be, horrific and awful. But I also don't agree that we have to, that there's nothing that we can do individually, that the whole experience of our lives is just something that we have to endure, and that it's futile for us to try or intend or plan or do anything. And I think that this quote is a good way to anchor and remind yourself that what do you want? The excuse that, life's really difficult and all these things, horrible things happen, and okay, that's one part of the argument, and I've done shows on that, and we'll keep doing programs and shows on that. How do you, stay joyful and horrible things keep happening? It's one of the shows I've done relatively recently. But the challenge is, on the other side of that is, how do you see yourself? And I think way too many people fall into this sort of default position of I'll wait for someone else to come along and deliver me to some sort of heightened level of experience, adventure, accomplishment, whatever. And I don't think that necessarily is the most effective way to surpass your goals. I think the idea of naming, you have to say what your goal is, even if it's a whisper in the back of your room and nobody can hear you. My goal is not to become run-of-the-mill, or whatever it is. You need to start saying it, because you have to convince yourself that it's possible and that you can do it. And then you have to make a decision. Are you who the world says you are, or are you who you say you are? And these sometimes can be absolutely incompatible. So, for instance, if Barbara Jordan was born and grew up in a time where people in society literally had signs at businesses and schools and restaurants and everything saying that someone that looked like her couldn't even come into their building. And if they could come in, they couldn't sit down or they couldn't use the water fountain. This was not, an imaginary thing. This was real. I mean, she could see it. So could everybody else. And in her own head, apparently, she made up her mind that that's not how she saw herself. That she saw herself as not run-of-the-mill, and not just not run-of-the-mill for a person of her generation, her gender, her ethnicity, but she wasn't going to be run-of-the-mill across the board. She was going to do things that anybody would be proud of. Being elected to a federal government political office in the United States is impressive. It's a huge geographic country, and it's got a large population, relatively speaking, 300 million plus, but the federal government, upper echelon politicians, it's small, minuscule numbers of people that represent this large nation. So anybody that is a congressperson has accomplished a lot. And for someone to do that while having society literally tell her to her face that she wasn't even good enough to go into certain schools or buildings. And yet she, in her own head, was like, this is not who I am, is something I think we can all learn from. Because I get so many people who say to me, I really would love to do this or try that, but, my friends or, my family says, or I just don't think I can. And it's like, my goodness, really? If you're not your advocate, who will be? And again, it doesn't matter what the specific goal is. It just matters that it's important to you. And it matters that you believe that you can. And then you get out there and you try. Will you fail? Yes. Barbara Jordan, who we're sharing about these great accomplishments, she failed. She failed when she ran for the state government. Not once, but twice. We keep going if we believe that there's something out there that's going to potentially deliver in our daily existence something that's not run-of-the-mill. And she was able to believe it and manifest it. It takes time. It takes failure. It takes perseverance. But I always wonder when people who give me all these reasons. That's what I was saying earlier, right? Oh, I want to, but nobody believes in me, or my family says this, or my friends are like, no way. My goodness. You have all of the possibilities that you could imagine. Why don't you go imagine them? And why don't you believe in you? It doesn't cost any money. So I just loved the opportunity to share with you this quote. I thank you for joining me in this episode. I again ask you to use this as a touchstone, as a moment to reflect on your own, seriously, honestly. What's your intention? Do you want to be run-of-the-mill? Or do you aspire to something different? And again, in any arena. It could be in your personal life, it could be in your professional life, it could be in your volunteer work, it could be in anything. But why not? Why not dare to be great? I thank you so much for joining me, and as always, you can come to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information and to join in with and be part of all the programs that we're putting forward. Again, thank you so much for joining me today.